Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. We'll be covering 9.2 today, which is a relevant topic because we will be looking at how technological advancements have helped eradicate some diseases and drastically reduce deaths associated with other diseases. So don't forget to write down some notes and email those to me when you're done. Okay, so the combination of new scientific technologies and government health care measures have drastically reduced illnesses since 1900. This is mostly talking about vaccines. We talked about penicillin in the last section. In this one, we will talk about the polio vaccine and TB vaccines and things that have reduce the number of deaths due to illnesses since 1900. But diseases caused by poverty have persisted. Obviously, poverty by itself cannot cause disease. You don't get a disease because you lack money. This is talking about the fact that diseases spread rapidly in places where people lack access to good health care, antibiotics, preventative medicines, and things like that. All right, so in this slide, we are looking at diseases that are spread because of poverty. So in areas where people have a low income, where they lack doctor's offices and hospitals, and they have poor living conditions, or maybe they're crammed all together in several like lean-to housing type places. This would be where they experience the spread of these diseases the most. The first one is malaria, and malaria is a parasitic disease, meaning that there's some type of parasite or bug that is causing this disease to spread. In this instance, it is mosquitoes. This is found in tropical areas. There is not currently a malaria vaccine. There actually is one that's in the trial stages, but there is not one released by the FDA yet. But experts have come up with preventative measures to help fight malaria, and the number one way that they try to prevent it is through mosquito nets that have been sprayed with insecticide, which of course protects people while they're sleeping, but it really doesn't solve the problem of, daytime hours, them being awake, working in a field or working outside or things like that. There has been progress made though, even with, preventative measures. In 2019, the World Health Organization, the WHO, have said that Argentina and Algeria are malaria free. The scary thing about this though is that some of the kinds of mosquitoes that are, I guess, evolving for lack of a better word, are resistant to insecticides. So the things that are, being sprayed to kill them are not working. Another disease that is spread because of poverty is tuberculosis, and this is an airborne disease, meaning it spreads through the air. So like if you have TB and you breathe on someone or you cough on them or sneeze or things like that, then this travels through the air and someone else can catch it. There wasn't really treatment for this prior to 1946, but then after that, experts discovered that antibiotics and long periods of rest can actually cause this disease to go away. And so in places where tuberculosis is commonplace, they actually vaccinate children. But like malaria, there are certain strains of tuberculosis that are becoming resistant to the antibiotics that are given. So yeah, new strains are resistant to antibiotics. They have found that one of the places where tuberculosis can spread rapidly is prisons, and that is because people are living in cells really close to each other. All right, another disease caused by poverty is cholera, and this is a bacterial disease that spreads through contaminated water. Cholera accounts for about 95,000 deaths per year worldwide. And most of the people that this affects are people in poor areas, in developing countries. This too has preventative measures. For one, boiling your water before you drinking it can prevent contamination. Also, washing your hands regularly. There is a cholera vaccine available, but if you live in an area where cholera is likely to spread, you still need to take preventative measures, even if you've had the vaccine. All right, polio. This too is caused by contaminated water, and it spreads through contaminated water, but it's a virus that is in feces. This used to be, a terrible disease. About 100,000 people per year were infected with polio. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had polio, and in his case, it caused paralysis, which was common. Not everyone who had polio were paralyzed, but it could result in paralysis and sometimes even death. And so that is until American researcher Jonas Salk invented the polio vaccine. This was in 1955, and this was, effective treatment. Actually, another guy came up with an oral vaccine, Albert Sabin, a few years after that. So polio has almost entirely been eradicated. There are only a few countries where polio still exists, and Pakistan and Afghanistan are examples of countries that still have polio. And the reason why is that people don't have access to the polio vaccine, usually because there's some type of war going on, which prevents people from going into health care facilities and getting the vaccine. Emerging epidemics. So since 1900, there have been some diseases that have been so widespread that they've actually caused an upheaval in society. We talked about the Spanish flu in a previous unit and how more people or more soldiers from World War I died of the Spanish flu than they did from the actual war. And because this was a time when soldiers were coming home from war, it spread through the migration of troops as they left Europe and went back home. And so a fourth of all Americans had the Spanish flu. A fifth of the entire world's population got this strain of the flu, and 20 million people died worldwide. So you can see this is something that is not just confined to one country, but it causes social upheaval. Another example of this type of epidemic is the HIV and AIDS epidemic. This one spreads through bodily fluids, and the way this works is that HIV weakens the immune system so that if a person has HIV, then when they get some other type of sickness, even like a common cold or something like that, their immune system is not capable of fighting it off. There is no cure yet for HIV and AIDS, but there are antiretroviral drugs that help prolong the life of people who have AIDS. And basically, it makes it so that HIV doesn't weaken the immune system. Another epidemic that has happened more recently is the Ebola outbreak in 2014. Ebola is deadly. It comes from a virus that infects the African fruit bat, but it can also infect other primates and humans. And so you can get the disease with exposure to fluids of either infected animals or infected people. Like I said, in 2014, there was a massive outbreak in West Africa, but because the World Health Organization encouraged other places to try its best to contain the disease, they were able to actually contain it and stop it from spreading worldwide. And that's not to say it didn't leave West Africa, because it did. There were some people in the United States even who wound up with it, but it did not spread rapidly. it did obviously cause fear around the world as people were afraid that Ebola was going to come to their country. This too is a very deadly disease. Most of the people who get Ebola die from it. All right, so longevity diseases. These are diseases associated with living for a long time. So this is kind of a good thing because they're diseases that we have because people are living longer. More people are making it to 75 and 85 and 95. One such disease caused by an inactive lifestyle or bad genes is heart disease. There are some people who are really healthy, but they still get heart disease because it's in their family. The major discoveries that have helped fight heart disease are obviously the heart transplant, which was first successfully performed in 1967 in South Africa, or by a South African, Christian Barnard. And then Robert Jarvik also created an artificial heart. And you can't live for a long time with an artificial heart, but it can be used temporarily while someone is waiting for a heart transplant. Disease associated with aging is Alzheimer's disease, and this affects mostly older people, but some middle-aged people as well. And this causes people to progressively lose their memory. So it starts with things like, I lost my keys, or you go check the door 5 times because you can't remember if you shut it. And then as it progresses, you don't recognize your family members and the people that are closest to you. This is a degenerative disease that basically causes your brain to break down. And so Alzheimer's does lead to death, and there is not a cure for this yet, but researchers and lots of rich people have spent time, money, and effort trying to come up with a cure for Alzheimer's. All right, that is it for today. Don't forget to send me a picture of your notes.